Imagine this. You wake up in the morning already exhausted. You reach for caffeine before your feet even hit the floor. By mid-morning, you're craving sugar. By afternoon, you're tired, foggy, and wondering why you can't stay focused. So you grab something quick, something processed, something engineered to taste good. And for a moment, you actually do feel better. But an hour later, you're crashing again. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Somewhere deep inside, you start thinking, what is wrong with me? But what if the real question isn't, what is wrong with you? What if the real question is, what has been done to my nervous system? What has been done to your nervous system? Why does it feel like my body is betraying me? Welcome to the Real Food Recovery Podcast. I'm Paige Alexander, host and creator, and this podcast exists to help people understand one powerful truth. When we reconnect with real food, we don't just change our diet. We're changing our brain. We change our nervous system, and often we change the entire trajectory of our lives. And I know this because it was me. For many years, I lived what I called the dessert diet only. Well into my 40s, I was basically living off sugar, surviving from one sugar binge to the next, crafting my days around getting my next hit of my drug of choice. Then, menopause started knocking on the door, and I realized something had to change. I knew that if I didn't shift course, I wasn't going to fit into my pants anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to keep up the fitness life I once enjoyed. But here was the problem. I wanted to change so badly, but at the same time, it terrified me because when the sugar binges started, it felt like monsters were coming out of the closet. I never knew how long they would stay. I never knew how many calories I would consume before it stopped. And I never knew how sick I would feel afterwards. Meanwhile, I was shoveling more in while mentally calculating how much exercise it would take to undo what I had just done and how many days I would have to restrict to compensate. It was exhausting. And when I say I couldn't stop, I literally mean I could not stop. I had no idea what was happening to me and no one to tell. How could I even explain it when I couldn't even explain it to myself? On the outside, I looked perfectly normal and fit, but on the inside, I was a bundle of nerves thinking I just had a willpower problem and a big appetite. I didn't see anyone else doing what I was doing, so I just assumed I must be broken. Honestly, I just thought of myself as a pig who could not stop eating. So embarrassing. Nothing glamorous about that. And I had absolutely no clue what to do about it. I didn't even discover the concept of ultra-processed food use disorder until my mid-50s. But when I did, everything started to change because suddenly I understood the science of what was happening inside my body. My brain was responding to hyperpalatable foods exactly the way it was designed to respond. The processed food industry had me in its grips, and at the same time I wanted out, I also wanted to hold on. I was fighting for freedom while clinging to my drug at the same time. If I gave up sugar, where would I go for comfort? How would I cope with the nervous energy that lived in my body, especially with my ADD brain? And honestly, I didn't even believe people who said they had given up sugar completely. I thought they were lying. No one in their right mind could give up sugar, right? It was my greatest comfort, my closest companion, the place I turned to when I needed relief. But eventually, I had to ask myself a very uncomfortable question. What if the thing I believed was bringing me the most comfort was actually the one thing causing me the most misery? What if the thing I depended on most was the very thing standing between me and peace? That question changed everything for me because when I began looking honestly at what sugar was doing to my brain and nervous system, I realized something powerful. My brain was constantly scanning the environment for dopamine, and no effort was too big to get the next hit, regardless of the cost. And the cost was often very, very high. But the addiction wasn't the only thing affecting my nervous system. There was also the constant food noise, the constant food anxiety. When would I eat next? What would I eat? Would there be enough? And strangely enough, that anxiety didn't just apply to me. Sometimes it extended to other people too. Let me tell you a story. Every year for my birthday, I climb Pikes Peak. It's a 14,000-foot mountain in Colorado. It's about an 8-hour, 13-mile uphill trek. Friends often join me, and I make sure everything is well planned so we can have a safe and successful climb. Part of that planning always included food, of course. I would pack enough ingredients to make 2 sandwiches per climber, along with baggies and lunch sacks for everyone's backpacks. One year, my friend Trish told me she only needed 1 sandwich. She said she knew she wouldn't eat the second sandwich, so it made me a little anxious. Now, if you've ever done backpacking, you know every ounce matters. Space matters. Weight matters. But the thought of her only having 1 sandwich made my anxiety spike. What if she got hungry halfway up the mountain? So I told her, you know what? I'm going to carry your second sandwich for you just in case. It helped calm my own nerves. And about partway up the climb, I ran into another hiker, which isn't unusual, but this young man, he looked disheveled and completely unprepared for the hike. He approached me and asked if I had any food. My heart broke for him, so I dug through my pack and I ended up handing him a sandwich. He thanked me profusely. And a few miles later, Trish caught up to me and said, "Hey, I saw you give that young man a sandwich. I'm really glad you did that." And I said, "I'm so glad you said that because, well, it was your sandwich." Now, ironically, I had a similar situation happen another year on the Manitou Incline. A young man had run out of water and was clearly dehydrated. He asked if I had any water to spare. I had a choice to make. I could tell him that I did have some and I could let him drink from my Camelback and risk germs, or I could tell him no and possibly end up doing CPR on him. I chose the germs. But here's the point. When you struggle with ultra-processed food use disorder, planning and preparation become powerful tools. Before I go to bed at night, I know exactly what the next day is going to look like and what my food plan is. My meals are prepared, my environment is ready, and there are few things that bring my nervous system more peace than knowing I'm prepared. You would not believe how many problems disappear when those simple steps are in place. Planning creates calm. Now, on a side note, Karma did catch up with me once. While I was climbing the Grand Canyon on the South Kaibab Trail, I ran out of water on the ascent. It felt like 100 degrees and the sun was literally beating down on me, so brutal. I had planned my water carefully, but we had inaccurate information about the water stations being open, so suddenly I was the one in trouble. A kind man at one of the water stops saw that what was happening and that I was in trouble and shared a bottle of Gatorade with me. I can tell you right now, liquid has never tasted so good. And that moment reminded me of something important. Sometimes we are the helpers, sometimes we are the ones who need help. But either way, preparation and awareness make an enormous difference. And this is why conversations about food matter so much. Right now in the United States, nearly 70% of calories people consume come from ultra-processed foods. Foods designed in laboratories, foods engineered to hit what scientists call the bliss point, the perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt that keeps the brain wanting more. The problem is this: our brains evolved to survive famine. They were never designed to fight a multi-billion-dollar food engineering industry. So millions of people blame themselves for something that is actually biological. because ultra-processed foods don't just affect body weight, they affect the nervous system. Blood sugar spikes trigger stress hormones. Inflammation disrupts brain signaling. Artificial additives interfere with appetite regulation. Over time, the body begins living in this low-grade state of survival mode, and the brain keeps asking one question: am I safe? When the nervous system doesn't feel safe, it starts searching for quick energy and quick comfort, and ultra-processed foods deliver both. So the cycle repeats, but recovery is possible. I once spoke with a woman who told me that every night after work she would sit in her car in the grocery store parking lot and eat an entire bag of cookies before going home. She said she didn't even want the cookies. She just felt an overwhelming pull towards them. And afterwards, she would sit there feeling ashamed, wondering why she couldn't stop. What changed everything for her was learning that her brain wasn't broken. Her nervous system was overwhelmed. She was sleeping like 5 hours a night, working under constant stress, living on convenience foods. Her brain was simply trying to survive the fastest way it knew how. So instead of starting with punishment or restriction, she started with regulation. She began eating simple, real foods: eggs in the morning, protein and vegetables during the day, foods that stabilized blood sugar and reduced inflammation. Within weeks, something remarkable happened. The cravings didn't vanish overnight. However, the volume of them started dropping. Her nervous system began settling down, and eventually, those cookies, well, they stopped calling her name from the parking lot. I have another friend who once described her brain as feeling like static on a radio station. She couldn't focus. She felt anxious all the time. Her energy was constantly crashing. She thought it was simply part of getting older. But when she removed most ultra-processed foods and replaced them with real single-ingredient foods, something unexpected happened. Within a few months, she said it felt like someone had turned down the static in her brain. The anxiety softened, the fog lifted, and she realized something surprising. Her personality hadn't changed. Her biology had. And that is why this conversation matters so much. Ultra-processed foods don't just affect our waistlines. They affect our energy. They affect our mood, our focus, our sleep, our hormones, even stress resilience. They influence how we show up in relationships, how patient we are with our families, how clearly we think at work, even how hopeful we feel about life. But when people begin nourishing their bodies with real food again, something powerful begins to happen. The nervous system shifts. Fight or flight slowly gives way to rest and restore. Digestion improves, sleep improves, energy stabilizes, and the brain begins remembering what calm actually feels like. This is what this podcast is about. Not perfection, not rigid rules, but understanding how our biology works and how real food can restore balance. On this podcast, you'll hear powerful stories from people who transform their health and their lives. You'll hear conversations with experts in nutrition, neuroscience, behavior change, and recovery. And you'll learn practical strategies that help calm the nervous system so real healing can begin. Because once the nervous system stabilizes, something remarkable happens. Cravings lose their grip. Brain fog lifts. Motivation returns, and many people realize they were never lacking discipline. They were lacking biological support. Your body is incredibly intelligent. It knows the difference between real nourishment and synthetic stimulation. And when you give it what it truly needs, it begins working with you again. If you're listening today and you feel stuck, exhausted, or frustrated with your relationship with food, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. Your nervous system may simply be asking for a different environment. And sometimes the first step towards changing your life is changing what's on your plate. Thank you for being here today for the very first episode of the Real Food Recovery Podcast. If this message resonates with you, share it with someone who might need it. And if you'd like to learn more about how real food supports recovery, resilience, and nervous system healing, visit realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. Because when we begin nourishing the body the way it was designed, something powerful happens. We don't just recover our health, we recover ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with me on the Real Food Recovery Podcast. Here we explore the deeper roots behind our habits, whether that's grief, trauma, or lifelong patterns, while looking at the full picture of health, sleep, movement, stress, spirituality, and self-care. Take what resonates, leave the rest, and be gentle with yourself as you explore new ways forward. Until next time, take care of your body, your mind, and your heart. For more resources and support, visit realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. The Real Food Recovery Podcast is created and hosted by Paige Alexander.